Hello, and thank you for listening to Renewables, a podcast by BioStar, which aims to explore the current and future energy landscape in America.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Renewables. I'm your host, David Smart. It's been a while since we've released an episode, had a little holiday break, so really appreciate everybody tuning in. And we're really excited to welcome Mason Moreland onto the show. There's been a lot of talk about real estate syndication lately, particularly in the ag space. You're seeing folks like Bill Gates is the #1 landowner in the USA, and you're hearing about a lot of these high net worth individuals kind of piling into ag land. We're going to get into that, why that is, and then we're going to talk specifically about wine, which personally is exciting to me. So Mason, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really great to have you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
And just to dot our I's and cross our T's, tell our viewers and listeners your title and what company you're with.
So I'm a managing partner at Texas Vine Country. So we're a wine beverage based business. Our primary business line is growing grapes. We also have other business lines as far as processing grapes and things like that as we expand. But our primary focus is growing grapes here in the state of Texas.
That's awesome, and we're going to get into Texas in a little bit because when I think vineyards, everybody thinks Napa, maybe Oregon these days. But so we're going to get into that. But tell us first about your background, how you ended up syndicating vineyards, how you got to here.
Yeah, talk about a long winding road. How do you how do you end up raising capital and developing vineyards? It's kind of a weird deal, but my background is actually as a biologist. So specialize in herpetology, so all the scaly, slimy stuff. So started picking up snakes and handling venomous snakes when I was like 12. So thought I was going to do that as a profession. Got to college and started doing research and realized I'd be chasing grant money, and nobody would be reading my papers except for the 3 other herpetologists. So I figured I should do something more applied, and ended up switching my major to natural resource management. So still a biologist, but really what I like to call is more applied rednecking. So you're actually applying your wildlife biology skills to real world problems, and especially at the interface with humans. So that was really interesting to me, and that's kind of what set me down this path that I'm on to get where I'm at. So fast forward.
Oh, please.
No, good. Okay, thank you. So fast forward, basically graduate, and I immediately start working as an environmental consultant. At the same time, start investing in real estate, same year. So as soon as I started my actual career, W-2 career, started investing in real estate at the same time. And I've been doing so ever since with my family, but a long winding road between there and now. But all the connections I've built from university and on ended up leading me to a place where I realized there was a big hole in the market here that could be attacked as far as the grape industry. And I had the right team around me.
That's great. And you joked that only 3 other, did you say herbologists, would read your paper?
Herpetologists, yeah,
herpetologists,
all 3 of them.
But that's funny, because one of my questions is how many folks around the country actually do what you do? My understanding is not very many, right?
Yeah, I can count them on one hand. So it's not a whole lot. As far as folks that work specifically with grapes, I can really only think of 2. One of them is more of a crowdfunding type platform, and the other one is a true syndicator, but they haven't done any grape work in a long time, and it sort of gets to why it works in Texas, right? And it's because California's gotten really expensive. No matter which way you cut it, land in Napa Valley, you're talking $60K plus an acre. That's just the ROI is not there, right?
Yeah.
So you got to look elsewhere.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's there's always a lot of innovation, it seems, in Texas. So now you have a picture of some grapes behind you. Is that in Texas?
Yeah. So this is our main base of operations behind me over my right shoulder here. That's
Awesome.
actually some Cannon County Vineyards Tempranillo in our experimental block for our system. So this was the first block of fully mechanized wine grapes planted in the state of Texas. Like end to end, it was designed to not be touched by people once it was established.
Yeah, and I really want to get into that fully mechanized production because that's obviously something that sets you apart. Talk a little bit about your process. Do you buy existing vineyards? Are you starting from scratch? Kind of walk us through, and then once you go through that, I think that'll kind of take us into that your fully mechanized production, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah. So our entire business model hinges on setting things up correctly the first time. So it's very much a development play. So we don't do much, if any. We haven't done yet any rehab, so to speak. So value add, going out and buying an existing vineyard and
Sure.
adding mechanization to it. There are some opportunities to do that, but with the way we do it in the state of the current Texas market, there's really not a whole lot of vineyards out there that offer the kind of scale, the size that really makes sense for us. So what we do is we raise capital, either 506B or 506C. For those of you guys and gals that are familiar with all the SEC regs that you can raise money under, difference being, can you advertise or not? We raise capital. And we go out and we develop new vineyards in about a half section increments. That's a half square mile for Eastern Seaboard folks that aren't in township range and sections. Everything's square out here. It's glorious. Very easy to chop up. So we do it in half square mile increments. And that's really even that number is optimized so that we can get the most use out of our equipment. So that keeps our $500,000 tractor busy all the time. It keeps all our ancillary equipment busy all the time. It keeps all our people busy full time. So it's really maximizing all of our overhead operations. And then we produce those wine grapes, sell them to wineries here in the state of Texas. And eventually I hope to become, hope Texas can become a wine exporter as well, or a fruit exporter, and generate returns for our investors. So it's really similar to what you'd see in ground up developments for commercial real estate.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And you invest a really significant amount of money into the equipment. And so let's get into that sort of what you call fully mechanized production. What does that mean for our viewers who are wondering, and talk about sort of the difference between the upfront cost and the kind of long-term / labor costs that maybe some of your competitors face?
Yeah, I think the best way to start that conversation might be just to start from a sense of what is there to be done in a vineyard, right?
Sure.
It's a biblical thing. People have talked about putting in the work in vineyards for thousands of years now, right? But it's really a year-round process. We only have a few months off. It's really between now and about February that we have off, which is you're really very much off. But the rest of the year there's constantly work. So there's a lot of what we call cultural practices that have to happen throughout the year. So you're pruning the vines in late winter, early spring. That has to happen every year. You are removing leaves from the vines. You're hedging the canopy. You're thinning the shoots from the vines. You're spraying the vines with foliar nutrients, or if you have a caterpillar problem, some kind of organic pesticides, things like that. And then, of course, you're harvesting. Now, mechanical harvesting has been figured out for a long time. People have gotten really good at that. You can mechanically harvest almost any system of grapes, but it all boils back down to grapes are structural parasites. They have to grow on something. There's a few varieties you can train very laboriously into a freestanding variety. Think like brands like Gnarly Head. They're called head trained vines. They look like a stump. But it takes many years to do that. It's hard to mechanize. So what we have to do on the front end is really design that to optimally be able to do everything we can by machine. So for some kind of context of of the manpower required to do this sort of work. On the vineyard behind me, it's about 350 acres contiguous. That would take us probably 40 to 60, maybe more seasonally, employees to run that in a traditionally managed system that is similar to what most of the rest of the state uses.
Yep.
And for us, we can run it with about 3.
Wow.
So it's a big operational cost difference, right? But what that really means to mechanize is you're just taking those hands out of the vineyard and doing it with a machine, a tractor. So we're buying specialized tractors to do the pruning, the shoot thinning, the desuckering, removing weeds, harvesting, everything end to end. So there's just a couple folks that are really needed to operate something like that.
That's awesome. And so you can run this whole operation with just a few people year round.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing keeping us from going below about 4 employees on this particular one is we still have a legacy block of about 30 acres that's in a more traditional system. So we still have some hand labor on that one, but all of our modern current vineyards are completely I wouldn't say touch free, but they're very, 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 very low touch. There's not a whole lot of humans out there after about year 4.
That's really amazing. And just in terms, I don't know how you quantify. I know a couple of folks in the business, and they actually bottle wine. So they always talk about cases per year. How do you quantify how much production, I guess, do you get out of that farm there?
So we go off of tonnage. So tons, and a good metric to figure out kind of how productive is a vineyard is tons per acre. That's usually how yield is quantified. So on a typical vineyard, at least in Texas and a lot of other areas as well, you're looking at a typical ton or yield of tonnage per acre of about 3 to 7 tons per acre. That's about average for traditionally trellis vineyards. Now, a system that we run, and that depends on variety, of course, each variety is a little bit different. Now, the system we run, we're actually able to push them a whole lot harder. It's called high wire. So you're actually bringing the vine considerably higher up off the ground, and you're able to create a much bigger canopy. So that each one of those leaves is a little solar panel, right? You're just collecting sunlight energy and air, carbon dioxide, and converting it into sugars and flavor compounds to ripen those grapes. So the more that canopy you can build within reason, everything's got to be balanced, the more you can yield. It takes some more inputs, but sunlight's one of those inputs. Sorry if you can hear that. My dog is going crazy in the background.
No worries. That's it's the norm here at the end of 2021, right? Work from
exactly.
home,
Homework.
dogs barking, kids.
She's
screaming.
my work partner now, but she goes with me to the vineyard too. But nice. You can build that bigger canopy. So just for comparison on systems like this in California, on the same soil, same water, folks are pushing, 7 to 8 tons per acre on a traditional system and 20 upwards of 30 to 35 tons per acre on this system. So significantly higher output. Now you lose a little bit of that quality level, right? You're not going to be seeing very many, really any bottles that are $150 coming off of a vineyard that's producing 10 or 20 tons to the acre. So, you're sacrificing part of that. But in Texas, particularly, one of the things that really drew me to it was that it had a market gap like that. Everybody in the state of Texas was primarily focused on premium and ultra premium bottles of wine. So you're looking at bottles that are all 30 something dollars plus, right?
Yeah.
And it left a huge gap because nobody could produce grapes, the raw materials, at a price to hit that central part of the market that everybody wants, that $15 bottle of wine that's phenomenal that you can get from any other major growing region. So that's really our goal, is to plug that gap, because right now, half of the winemaking materials that the state of Texas consumes, and almost all of it's consumed in state, very little Texas wine is exported out of state, is actually imported as bulk juice or bulk wine from out of state, mostly from California. So one of our main goals is to actually cut that off and make Texas self-sufficient.
That's amazing. And you mentioned expanding that canopy and those leaves are solar panels. So we did not rehearse that, but that's a great transition into kind of the energy side of things. We like to talk about a bunch of different topics on the podcast, but of course, given our core business and given that the podcast is called Renewables, we love to touch on energy. I've just been super impressed as we've kind of gotten to know each other about your knowledge of kind of the sustainability world and various technologies that you're monitoring and considering in your operation. When we first met, actually, you were reaching out, I think, about about digesters, anaerobic digesters, and potentially developing a digester down there, which is awesome. I know you mentioned floating solar, which is super cool and something that we're paying attention to. So talk about some of the things you have your eye on and kind of some of the things maybe not as pie in the sky that the Vineyard is already doing in general to become more efficient and sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's so good point. My W-2 job, I still have a W-2 job, and I'm an environmental consultant. So I still do a bunch of solar, utility scale, community scale, everything in between, development end to end. So very plugged into that world still, for sure. And one of the cool things about Vineyards is that it really gives you a lot of opportunities and ag in general, to find ways to use what you've already got to create additional income streams. And what you guys do with like biogas and digesters is exactly in line with that kind of mentality. And farmers, especially, because the primary grape farmer in the state of Texas is a convert from cotton farming, or they may still have 10,000 acres of cotton. Sure. They only have 100 acres of grapes, but they're always looking for things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities, and I think really France and California are some of the leading regions that are doing research into this and seeing kind of what fits and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. But what's really interesting to me is actually like the additive uses, right? So like you said, floating solar, right? So one of the things that I am building out now, the plan for to future-proof us, is we're really dependent on groundwater out here. Mm-hmm. We get rain at the right time of year for grapes when we need it, but we don't get a whole lot of rain at the second right time of the year in the fall. Mm-hmm. We get most of it in the early summer. So we are dependent on groundwater out here. If you've heard anything about the Ogallala Aquifer, it's all gloom and doom, right? Everybody's like, it's going to dry out. It's it's gone in the next 50 years. Well, we've seen a pretty stable trend where we're at, and we choose properties specifically in areas that are consistently rising or level water tables. But to future-proof ourselves, we're also looking at, hey, how do we build storage ponds so that in anticipation of when we need that water, even though we have potentially much less water yield in the future, can we build ponds to actually start storing at atmospheric pressure some of that water so that we can irrigate in that pulse when we need it, even though we're not producing as much water? Or can we truck it in from somewhere else that's water rich? Things like that, because our climate's great for it. But if the aquifer is limited, then we have a problem. So to help future-proof ourselves, we can do that. But then being able to add solar on top of that to actually negate the cost or significantly offset it for running the pumps, running all the booster pumps, running all the valves and everything. That's incredible. I mean, not only that, it's synergistic in the sense that it reduces evaporation. I mean, there's so much cool stuff that you can do with that. It reduces the amount of dust you're getting into there. Like, all good things are happening when you're layering these multiple uses on top of one another. And that's what's really cool about vineyards, because they're their own ecosystem. Sure. Unlike, some people can do row crops in a way that's pretty regenerative and holistic, but it's a whole lot easier with permanent crops because they're just sitting there. You're not pulling them out of the ground every year and plowing back over. Sure. So we're really able to layer a lot of different things on top of that. And as far as multiple uses and regenerative uses, we're able to do cover crops in between the rows, where we're actually building either something useful, so like some kind of crop that we can actually hay off and sell, or we can do different plantings to help with pollinators. So we can actually bring in beekeepers and lease that out. And we also lease the land to sheep farmers as well. So that actually keeps our vegetation management bill really low.
Nice.
Since we have nice high vines, we can just let sheep loose in there to do all the work, and then they get fed. We get a nice fertilizer kick because we produce a lot of grapes, and we can use any little free fertilizer hit we can take and generate a little income on the side too. So there's a lot of different things you can just start layering one on top of the other, and cumulatively they can make a big difference.
Yeah, I think in the past, 5, 6, 7 years, I've just been so amazed every time I kind of get closer, and I know this much, just enough to be dangerous, but every time I talk to a farmer or someone in the ag space, just how focused they already are on sustainability. And I think it's really easy for folks who are kind of separated from the ag world to look at, the dairy industry, for example, right now is under a lot of pressure, and there's all this manure, the big manure problem. And but people don't really realize, I mean, for decades, farmers have been trying to solve these problems and trying to, like you said, make use of everything that you have, right? There's very little waste on a farm, and just amazing how much time and effort farmers, spend trying to make use of every last, resource on the farm. So you mentioned an interesting word, regenerative, and I love that word, regenerative farming. We talk a lot about at BioStar and closing nutrient loops. You kind of touched on that a little bit, but just at a higher kind of level, like one thing we say a lot at BioStar is, soil. Let's start thinking about soil as a living organism, right? Instead of just a vehicle to grow living organisms. So that's kind of how we think about it, and a lot through the lens of soil health. But just high level, what does regenerative farming mean to you? What does that kind of define that, I guess, for our users from a vineyard's perspective?
I sort of laugh because it's sort of a running joke amongst all vineyard and wine enthusiasts. It's called regenerative disease. Everybody gets hung up on, they want to be regenerative, but it means something different to everyone, right?
Sure.
So it's a, how do you quantify this, right?
Right.
So that's sort of a running joke in the vineyard world. But yeah, so to me, regenerative is really being additive to, like you said, the living organism that is the soil. So out here, we're on the high plains, at least as we call it, Texas. We're on the Great Plains. It's flat as a pancake. The main asset we have is soil. The next one is water, and it's all rainwater because we don't have surface water. The next one's groundwater. So soil is your number one asset. If you're not taking care of your soil, you got nothing. It's blown away. There's a reason the Dust Bowl happened, right? So if you're farming in such a way that you are being additive to the organic matter of that soil, and you're keeping it in one place, to me, that is regenerative where we're at. So to do that, you have to tie in all those other things I think most people typically think about when you're thinking about regenerative farming.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And, love the additive. Everyone's talking about additionality right now in the carbon world. So totally makes sense. Shifting gears a little bit, we obviously manufacture an organic fertilizer from effluent waste streams, most times a manure waste stream from a farm, or we have food waste digesters as well around the country. Is there a place, I'm speaking just from a high level consumer standpoint, knowing nothing. Is there a place for organics in vineyards? Is it important to you for things to be organic? I guess you don't see a lot of organic like labeling, but maybe I'm just not looking in the right places. Is there a place for organics and organic fertilizer in growing grapes in the vineyard world?
100%. So it really depends on where you're at in the world. So and your methods, right? So for us, we're producing a high intensity product, right? So we're producing a lot of yield, a lot of tonnage per acre. So that requires a lot of inputs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're using up a lot of nitrogen, you're using up a lot of water, and you're sucking up a lot of CO2 and sunshine. Excuse me. So there's absolutely a place for organic fertilizers in that sort of system. Now, where you start to get away from organic fertilizers and into organic pesticides, organic treatments and things like that, are when you start getting over to your premiums and your ultra premiums. They're focused on keeping yields really, really low. If you're putting any kind of nitrogen on there, you're going to start having issues with the grapes trying to produce too much.
Interesting.
So that's sort of a balance where I think it depends on what system you're looking at. Something that's really interesting about organics in the vineyard industry is the way that we farm personally isn't like the farming aspect of it is pretty similar to what most people do. It's not all that different. It's a lot of structural, philosophical, and spacing, stuff like that. The actual management of vines, they're still vines. You still have to manage them in the same fashion. And we're almost organic. We're really, really close. We could basically swap out a couple of herbicides for mechanical management or livestock management, and then find something more creative for a couple of different insecticides, which we already use, like BT and things like that to control caterpillars and some other pests, and we'd be there. So it's really not that far-fetched for even big industrial vineyards, kind of like what we're putting in to go organic, and that's a big selling point on wines these days.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe we need to organize some totes of Super 6 organic fertilizer and ship them down to Texas so you can do a little crop study and field trial. That would be really fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. You can do it row by row out here too. So it's like you can see it literally, like look down this one, like, oh well.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And we've got, if anyone's interested in that, we don't have any on vineyards, but we have some field trials available about our Super 6 fertilizer, our organic liquid nitrogen fertilizer on our website. So feel free to dig around on there. We're going to kind of wrap up here. This has been super interesting. A couple of questions before final thoughts. What are you most excited about? You've got a lot of different things you're considering, and I can tell just from kind of our conversations that you're always looking for ways to enhance your operation. What are you most excited about in the next 5 years, 10 years? What gets you excited about the future?
For me, it's absolutely the prospect of Texas becoming self-sufficient, right? Because you see these American wine regions in particular, like California, Oregon, and Washington stories before now have been very similar to the track Texas is on. And now we have a concrete plan of like, how do we get to self-sufficiency as a wine industry in the state of Texas within the next 10 years. I've got the plan, right? So it's, we need to get this many acres in. Here's how we're going to do it. We're already raising capital and getting vineyards put in at the rate we need to do it at. And we're lining out all the contacts to get the wine made in the state of Texas instead of outside the state of Texas. Yeah. And that's what gets me jazzed is just being able to see that, we're continuing to make the brand of the state even stronger, which, it's already got a great brand. You slap a Lone Star and made in Texas on it. It's already got some pizzazz to it. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really cool. And it's cool that you have a plan and now you have to execute it. Sometimes that's the scariest part, but no, that's great. It sounds like you're on an amazing track and look forward to staying in touch. Any final thoughts? And if not, how can our listeners and viewers find you online if they want to have a conversation? Just give us your handles so folks can look you up.
Yeah, sure. So, final thoughts, don't be afraid to, don't have wine fear. Feel free to pick up any bottle you see and just give it a try. I'm not a connoisseur by any means. I just appreciate wine. I like it. Not a super taster. I will pick up any bottle of wine at any price just to give it a shot and see what it's all about. in a new region. It's super fun to do. The more you taste different stuff, the more you start learning about it just on your own, even. And if you're still nervous, go get a little bit of education online or something. Wine can be so much fun, and it's only as snobby and stuck up as you want to make it. So there's a lot of fun wine people, especially after they've had a glass or two.
Sure.
Yeah, you can find me on texasvinecountry.com. That's our primary website for kind of houses all our brands. That's our parent company. And I'm super active on LinkedIn. I'm on there almost every day, if not every day. Most of our content goes out through LinkedIn on both TVC's page and then my personal page as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's how we originally connected. You got to love the power of the social networks, connecting good, smart people together. It's great to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. And I will include that texasvinecountry.com in our show notes. Really appreciate the time, Mason. Let's stay in touch, and maybe we'll have you back in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely, David. I appreciate it. And we'll have to get together and see what's happening new in the world of renewables out here in West Texas with vineyards and stuff, too. It'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to connect over a glass of Texas grapes. So we'll have to find a way to do that.
Let's do it.
Thanks a lot, Mason. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Hello, and thank you for listening to Renewables, a podcast by BioStar, which aims to explore the current and future energy landscape in America.